but we are in here now. Hopefully everybody can hear us. Just holla and say hey in the chat if you can. Y'all should be able to not chat with each other. Actually, you'll be able to see each other now. Hopefully that works. And if you can't chat with each other, because I actually don't know if GoToWebinar like lets people do that, but you can go ahead and type in the questions, and I'll read them aloud, and I'll also make sure everybody else can see it. Lauren says it's Mercury retrograde. It is Mercury retrograde. See, look, that's so real. All the mechanics stopped working. So I'm so sorry, Roni, you were doing such a great intro. But anyways, welcome to week 3. I'll do this welcome one more again. Welcome to week 3 of the Defining Black Sisterhood course. Leslie Mac here with Dr. Roni Dean-Burren. And as you mentioned last week, this week we're getting a little more serious. We had some nice lighter topics. Although Black Auntie got a little deep there for sure. But this week we're really going to be getting into some of the nitty-gritty of the course. And I said a little bit of housekeeping. Just again, y'all should be able to talk with each other, I believe, or at least chat directly to the whole audience. If not, put your comments into the questions and we'll make sure that we read them out loud and let everybody know. You can also raise your hand, just click the little hand signal, and we'll see you and we'll unmute your mic so that you can talk to everyone. And you can do that almost at any time. There will be a few things where we'll actually request some input and some feedback from y'all. And so I'm going to turn it over to Roni. She's going to give us a little overview of this week's theme.
Okay, so this week's theme is defining, oh wait, hold on, I gotta get my paper out now. Yeah, I can't go off the cuff purely. Defining the dynamics of sisterhood, power, and precarity. And the exciting part about this particular theme, I guess, was when Leslie and I were planning this really was sort of birthed out of not just the wanting to do this course, but out of our real lived experiences at the time. And we were having real conversation in our real lives with each other, amongst each other. Yeah, sometimes with the whole internet. We were talking about this and about this dynamic and what this dynamic looked like. And we thought it just was going to fit so perfectly with this course. And it was really perfect to sort of follow the Black Auntie-hood and then previously the week on pop culture and stuff. So we felt like this topic was a little more heavy. And so we felt like situating it on week 3 was going to be exactly right.
Absolutely. Yeah, we definitely thought week 3 would be the best way to go about this. So give me one sec while I pull up my actual notes for class, because y'all didn't hear this before, but these technical difficulties have pushed me to my laptop to do class tonight, which I don't know where anything is on it. I really just use it while I'm traveling and for emergencies, which apparently we're in emergency mode. So here we are. Let me just pull up my notes.
Well, so what we have done in the past is obviously we'll start off with an opening icebreaker and a way to kind of introduce the topic. And so Leslie and I thought it would be great to talk about times when power has played out for us in our sisterhood, in our various sisterhood circles, good and bad. And so what that's kind of looked like. And so a story I shared with Leslie earlier was as you all know, for the last 3 years, I was in school getting my PhD, and I typically, probably since 2009, I've taken a girls' trip with my 2 best friends, Sherry and Janice. Sherry was on week 1. And so, but during the time when I was in school, of course, they knew I wasn't working and they were still working. And so when it was time to plan girls' trips or when it was time to plan stuff, they would just be like, okay, so I have miles, so I'll get your ticket. You don't have to do the hotel. Like, it was just this. And I didn't have to ask, right? Because first of all, that would have been a whole nother layer for me. I couldn't have asked. I could have, but I couldn't have, right? And so to sort of just bring all of that down in the sisterhood, it was like, okay, so Roni, I booked your ticket. And so that was just a really great way to sort of support me when I was in that place where, like, hey, I probably can't afford a plane ticket right now. Hey, I probably can't even afford to like get lit with y'all. But they were like, we got you. Don't worry about it. Like, we moving forward. You booked. Here you go. I got you. So in that way, that was one of the examples that really made me feel supported and sort of remove that power dynamic that could have been, I guess it could have been ugly, right? It could have been a place where all three of us felt really weird about it, but you know, being who they are in our sisterhood, they were just like, yeah, no, we got you. Let's keep it moving.
Yeah, you know, the things I started thinking about were a lot about, you know, I talked a couple of weeks ago about how I spent a lot of my childhood in Jamaica, and a lot of my cousins also did the same thing. So we'd come, some from the UK, some from Canada, some from the US, and we'd all end up at our various grandmothers' homes to spend either some part of the summer or the whole summer, or some of us were living there. I lived there for some time. And one of the things I remember playing out, because my cousins, we definitely consider ourselves a sister circle, and our mothers also consider themselves a sister circle amongst each other. And so one of the things I remember was seeing the power dynamics between our moms kind of play out in how people treated us, individually and collectively. And so it was like this interesting, like, okay, well, your mom emigrated somewhere, but she's, you know, like there were all these like different layers of like class and like employment and access to resources that I didn't even realize existed until I saw how people were treating each of us. And so that was one of my earliest memories of being like, oh, like I had come into this thinking we were all the same, we were all equitable, and that wherever my cousins were living were similar to where I was living or how I was living. And it was kind of a revelation to me to be like, oh, that's actually not the case at all. So I remember that. And it was one of the things that made me really like think about that barrel in that auntie short from last week, because that we would, you know, our moms would send us with barrels down, or they would send like packages with various people. And it was always like, oh, you know, what did your mom send? Like this thing of like, oh, was it really expensive? Was it frivolous? Was it practical? Was it whatever? And so that was one of the things that I remembered the most. I think Christina has her hand up. I'm going to unmute you, Christina Leva. Unmute.
No.
Hey, Christina.
I accidentally clicked the button.
Okay, no problem. If you want to talk again, just, you know, raise your hand again. I'll take it down for you now. And Lauren, hey, Lauren. I'm unmuting you. Hey, Lauren, you're unmuted.
Okay, great. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we sure can.
So this is a really interesting question. The one thing that popped into my head immediately is when I was in college, I was an undergrad, and it was always like just a struggle to get through each semester because my father would always fail to pay tuition. And so when I got to my senior year, I technically still had 3 classes left to take because, you know, I was registering late, couldn't always get the classes I needed. So I just pretty much took whatever they gave me. And I was missing 3 graduation requirements by the time my graduation year came. I worked for 2 years, and there was an aunt of mine who is basically the black sheep of the family. She had a drug problem. She's kind of been in and out of different waves of addiction. And she called me up one day and said that her ex-husband's father had passed away, and he left a good chunk of money. And she said, I want to give some of that money to you so you can finish school. And it was a big deal because my family had given me so much shit for not finishing. Even though I was working full time, even though I easily got a job out of college, right outside of college, when a lot of my friends who already had degrees were still struggling to find full time positions. But that didn't matter. I didn't have the degree, you know. And how dare you not have the degree? You didn't do this or that enough. You didn't work yourself to death in order to finish school by yourself. Why should I help you? But here comes this black sheep of the family who comes in and says, no, I'll do it. And, you know, I had some trepidation because I knew people had warned me about her when I first got to school. People would say, stay away from Aunt Peggy. You know, she had that drug problem. Don't go anywhere alone with her. Meanwhile, she was the one that ended up stepping up and making sure that I finished school. And there's some people in my family who would not want to hear that. There's at least one aunt, her younger sister, who does not know, because it would just kill her to know that the fuck up of the family was the one who was able to do this for me. So.
Thanks for that, Lauren. Yeah, that's a really good story. Thanks for sharing. I appreciate it.
Somebody else have
Yes, I don't know if anybody else has any other stories that they want to share of how power has played out for you in sisterhood spaces, good and bad, whichever you want to share. Definitely just raise your hand. We'll be happy to unmute you and let you share with us. And if you think of it later, raise your hand then as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So we have, as we did the other previous weeks, Ryan and I kind of thought of some larger themes to start with to talk about. And so one of the first things that popped into my head when we started discussing this was the unacknowledged power discrepancies within sisterhood. So we just talked about, Roni, myself, and even Lauren talked about, the acknowledged ones, right? We know that, as Lauren's talking about her aunt, it's very obvious to everybody as they talk about her aunt that there's a power dynamic difference there, right? But one of the things I think is really toxic in sisterhoods of all kinds, and actually relationships of all kinds, but since we're talking solely about sisterhood here, I'll keep it focused, is unacknowledged power discrepancies. So the fact that power discrepancies sit in the room, they exist, but we operate and interact with each other as if that's not the case. I've seen this make spaces so toxic, and it happens really quickly. It doesn't take a lot. It's almost like, it's just kindling, and all it needs is one spark, and the whole situation will flare and blow up so fast because emotions become involved, and because things were unacknowledged, it becomes impossible for discussion to really take place amongst folks. One of the things I noted about it was that, to me, it's almost kind of a insertion of white supremacy culture, to me, because that's kind of a thing white supremacy does, which is like assume everything is equal, everybody's the same, everybody has everything that everybody else has without discussing it, and then moving forward from there. Why do you think this is something that's so common? Have you found it to be common? Do you think it's an issue that comes up, Roni? What are your thoughts on that?
I do. I think it is very common to just pretend like we're all on equal playing ground in the room, and it just makes relationships hard. It just makes sisterhood hard. And so the example that I thought of immediately was being in college, and I was in a sorority, and there were mainly two Black sororities on my campus. I went to a predominantly white school, and we always said at SMU, it wasn't but 5 Black people. Well, we say 12. It wasn't but 12 Black people, right? And half the women were Deltas and the other half were AKs. Like, that was pretty much it. I think maybe my sophomore year, we got some Zetas too. So, but just thinking about like who we all were within the sorority, inside the sorority, within the whole Panhellenic thing, right? But pretending like all of us had what we all didn't really have, that there were people in the room whose parents were or could probably write checks for tuition. And then there were those of us who were like, yeah, I'm finna get dropped from all my classes, but at the same time, I'm finna wear this, we all going to the mall to get this outfit, and like, we just gonna pretend like, and nobody is saying anything, right? And then you wonder why, like, I mean, I like her, but I don't like her. Because that there's like this unacknowledged thing that exists between y'all. And especially, I think it happens on college campuses because there's almost this assumption that since we're all here, we're all the same.
Yep.
And it's quite dangerous, to pretend like that. And like you said, it is really a tool of white supremacy to just say, it ain't all the same. And I think because there's almost this idea that we're supposed to be sisters, right? If you see another Black woman, you see a Black girl, y'all are sharing something of the same space, then we just supposed to be sisters. And so it's just supposed to be cool. And so I don't need to talk about the fact that people don't really listen to you because of X, Y, and Z, but people listen to me because of X, Y, and Z. Or, like, I don't want to say that because we sisters, right? Like, hey, sis, right. At the end of the day, that person who doesn't have access, that person who isn't getting heard is really just you're squishing her even more. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I definitely, like I said, I think colleges really are where you see it a lot, just because everybody is at the same college. So it's like, we all here, right? So we
all here, we all the same. Right, and then you kind of replicate that as you get to adulthood, because you never learn how to acknowledge those things in spaces. So, you know, I went to boarding school for high school. So that's the thing that I went to, like, immediately was, you know, I went to this really fancy boarding school with all these, like, super rich kids. And here's me from Flatbush, Brooklyn, you know, and all my little homegirls that also took the train up from New York City to school and everything. And, you know, they be having these conversations about, you know, going to, you know, Stowe or whatever for spring break. And we was like, well, can we meet at Grand Army Plaza? Like, you know, to have a hot dog, like, really? And it would be weird because it'd be all these times where it wasn't acknowledged. And then there'd be those moments where it was like, yeah, we can't pretend, right? This here is too stark that there's no way for us to not acknowledge it, or not at least have it be awkward because of it. But I think that there's no context for those skills being learned, especially among sisterhood, because when you add that secondary layer, which we're going to get to in a second, of, you know, the role we're supposed to play, right? And what sisterhood among Black women is supposed to look like, you know, that it's supposed to be jealous, it's supposed to be catty, it's supposed to be all these things. And we're supposed to be in competition with each other on some level.
Right.
So now you have no context at all for even just, you know, as you said, when your sister is being silenced, like it's not always you're going to be the one that's going to be able to give her voice, right? Or to move everything out of the way, but the acknowledgement, right?
Right.
Just like, hey, I see what's happening. I understand what's going on. You're not, you know, imagining it. It's not fake. It's not, you know, just in your head. This is real, and I see you, and I understand what you're saying right now.
And that part is huge. Just like you said, just the acknowledgement. Like especially if you, I think about working in a place that's predominantly white, and you know people ain't treating you right, and maybe there's one other Black girl there, and maybe y'all not even cool, but she comes by your desk and she's like, look, I know how they doing you, and I see them, and I just want you to know that I got you however I can get you. Okay, see, like, can we just pretend, like, can we just
do that?
Can we just do that? Can we just acknowledge that those layers and that those levels exist? And how that builds sisterhood, the acknowledgement by itself, right? Like you said, I may not be
the humanity of it, right?
But if you can just acknowledge that, like, I see you, like that right there, because that's what it is. I see you, and I see how they're doing you.
Asia has her hand up. Asia, I'm gonna unmute you real quick. Hey, Asia, you're unmuted, but it's not showing me that your mic is connected.
Here I am.
There you are.
Okay.
Hey.
Hi, everybody. So I was just thinking about, like, I actually never had, like, an adult experience with a group of Black women that was larger than, like, 3 people. I didn't, like, go away to college and stay. And all of my work experience has been in predominantly white institutions. So I didn't find myself in, like, a Black space until I was in a group and met you guys on Facebook. And seeing, like, everybody, the same, I guess, idea of, you know, everyone's here, we're all coming from a similar place, we can all relate to each other. But when we're all in one room, you start to see all of the different privileges that different people are coming with. And, you know, when you build those individual relationships, like, you know, let's say, you know, that, you know, Roni is in school and she's working on becoming a doctor, so, you know, that's where her money is going, and she don't got it like that. But then someone else comes in talking about whatever shit to kind of, like, try to oppress you in that way. And then, like, people knowing you personally, trying to, like, have your back in that instance. It kind of, it's just like all these different dynamics of trying to, like, build these relationships, but also trying to, like, have your own back and have other people have your back. And I just feel like that conflict or that tension is heightened in these spaces because we're all supposed to be or expected to all be on the same team. But when people don't acknowledge what all those different privileges are in those spaces, it's hard because you still have people in the end who are just feeling like you said, like they're being squished even more because they're in a place where they're supposed to feel safe.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's so true.
And how it feels unsafe too, I think, to not be acknowledged. Like it would feel unsafe to me if I were in a sister circle and we were acting like we all had it like that, and whatever had it like that meant, right? Whether it was money, whether it was education, whatever it was, like it would just make me like, these really ain't my people. Like, because we're not really talking about the fact that I can't really do that, or I can't really say that, like all of the things that it could be, because it's not just money, right? It could be 25 different things, right? Like that I have the privilege to be able to say this, and that my story is believable because of this versus your story is not believable because of that. I'm dark skinned or you're light skinned, like all of those things. Like if I were in a sister circle and nobody was acting like that shit wasn't existing, like I would just be like, I can't really, I can't really vibe with y'all like that because that's not safe.
I definitely can't get comfortable. That's for sure.
It's not safe. It's not safe.
Laura mentioned that happened to her once at one of the orgs she worked at. I find this to be very common in work group circles as well. This like lack of understanding that other people's situation is not your own. When it's like, oh, let's go out. Oh, let's do that. It's like we can't all be doing all the same things. We really can't do it. And you touched on a few of these things, but some of the stuff that I had just jotted down that power will come into play in sisterhood is colorism, class struggles, privilege, education, access to resources, romantic privilege. Like there's a lot of things that come into play where it's like, okay, you have a full-time partner that can back you up all the time, whereas I don't, or, my husband works from home, so I can rely on him throughout the day to do things for me. But, you and your husband work opposite schedules because that's the way that your life is currently set up. So there's a lot of stuff where it's like, you can't, like I said, without acknowledging it, it makes it really difficult to kind of, make true connections with people when you don't even acknowledge them. And I think we have to kind of push back against society's inclination to fake like we're all the same, right? This like, I don't know, this whitewash MLK, he didn't want us to look at whatever. Well, look, let me tell you, don't use his name in vain like this, because it's not true. Don't do it. So I know, Roni, you wanted to talk a little bit about, I hope everybody got to go through the materials this week, and one of them was this NPR show with Omarosa in it, which I thought was really interesting. But I know you wanted to talk a little bit about that specifically, because it raised some really interesting notions and commentary around media's portrayal of sisterhood and how that kind of come into play when we talk about power.
Yeah. So if you didn't listen to the NPR interview, when you get off, like go listen to it. It's like 11 minutes and 20 seconds, right? But I listened to it over and over, even though Omarosa is on there and she gets on my last, and I mean my last, like she is tap dancing on it, okay? But so what they were talking about was sisterhood and what Black sisterhood looks like and what Black women on TV look like. And there was a sociologist on there, and she talked about the commodification of the sharp-tongued Black woman. Right. So this idea that it is a moneymaker to have Black women on TV going, baby, look here, let me tell you like this here. Like that is a moneymaker, and how that has become the way that Black women in their sisterhood is portrayed on TV, right? That she named all these shows, The Real Housewives of Atlanta, and maybe she even mentioned The Doctors of Atlanta. I haven't seen that show, but just all these different shows, and how this whole like sharp-tonguedness, like that was the one that really stuck with me, because I just thought about like, the tongue being a knife, right? And how that's commodified. And then so I was thinking about that and how that plays into real life roles, because listen, reality TV is hot, right? I mean, because first of all, it ain't real, that. But, and it was funny because they mentioned one of the housewives, and I can't remember who it was because I've watched Housewives of Atlanta a lot, but one of the housewives not being invited back because she didn't basically have enough drama. And so how that, like, if you ain't about the drama, right, you're not going to be on TV. But I was thinking, how does that trickle down into our real life relationships? I think it does, because I think that people see that on TV and they be like, oh, like when Nene told Marla, bitch, you better whatever. When I see Keisha, I'm gonna tell you, like, I feel like you watch these shows and they be gassing you up. You're like, I will do that too. Because there is not, because I think that part of that is who we are. Like, don't get me wrong, like, sharp tongue black, listen, I have nieces that's 4 that can get with you. Okay. Like, what you say? So they can. So it's not that that's not a part of who we are, but I wonder sometimes if seeing all of that reality TV and seeing celebrities that we care about and all of that we, you know, we're invested in their lives and their sharp tonguedness, and then does that trickle down into who we are, right? Does it cause us to have less grace for each other and be so quick to be like, world star, you know? I wonder that. I feel like I see it a little bit. I don't know if you do, but I feel like all of the TV of who we are, and I'm not one of those people like, oh, we got to start acting right on TV so they'll treat us right. No, it has nothing to do with that, but it just has something to do with how that sisterhood is portrayed, how it's sold and marketed, and then how it sits and falls on our shoulders.
Yeah, and I think it's like, I do think that there's something there, and that's definitely real. And I think that there's, you know, we almost had a perfect storm. We had the rise of reality TV and we have social media climbing at the same time. And I think together they've created a very, altered state of reality where, you know, your rapidness to response and your wittiness, right? You want to cut the deepest, the hardest, the funniest, the fastest. You know, both in reality TV and on social media, and it creates this like, I'm gonna get this jab in, I'm gonna get this meme off, I'm gonna, you know, all of those things that come into it. And there's fun in that. Look, when we're talking about movies and we're you know, about whatever, but it can skew the way we then interact with each other in various spaces. Lauren has her hand up. I'm gonna unmute Lauren. Hey, Lauren.
Hey, sorry I'm talking so much.
Talk as much as you want to.
So this idea of like Black women being able to like, you know, use their words to kind of cut down people or like, you know, make a statement or, you know, whatever it may be. Like it's really something, because at my first job, I worked at a very small boutique PR firm. And in DC, there's like this group of Black women who like has a reputation of like working their way up the ranks. And they do that by like cutting other Black women down. That's like the not so pretty picture. You know, everyone who's worked with them closely knows it's something that they do, but they're so highly respected that nobody says anything about the fact that they cut people down. And I worked with them for so long, for like about 2 years, and with one of the women, because she owned this firm. And it was the most abusive place I've ever worked. Like, it was incredibly abusive, to a point where I was terrified of working with Black women ever again. And like when I left, I said, I'll never work in a place where there's a bunch of Black women, because I'm opening myself up to be hurt. But what ends up happening, and someone told me this recently, is that like, because I've been raised to be a nice girl, often people, especially like older Black women, will underestimate me because they think, oh, she's a nice girl, she's not going to clap back at me. And so here I am at 34, 10 years later, and I'm like, I need to rebrand myself as someone who will clap back, and who will boss up if she has to. And I just always regret not being able to clap back the way I wanted to, because I had so much to lose at 22.
Yeah. That's a lot. That thank you, Lauren, for sharing that. They talk about that a little bit too in that NPR piece, and talk about, you know, this expectation that maybe we also have of other Black women. The sociologist was talking about her first job when she was maybe 22, and she was hired by this older Black woman who said she was gonna mentor her. And she said it was the most toxic environment she'd ever been in. She's like, she bullied me and it was just horrible. And she was like, on the one hand, we have this expectation like, hey sis, like you're my sister, like I got you, whatever. And then maybe on the other hand that, you know, obviously Black women aren't a monolith, right? And there are mean Black women, like that's actually a thing, right? And that we are not, you know, beyond reproach or beyond accountability. And so this idea that there's this high expectation with, you know, amongst Black women that there will be this sisterly bond or something, because I get it. And then when you meet someone and you're like, wait, what is you doing? Like,
what are you doing, sis? What's happening here?
No, I don't want to do that. And I too have been there where like somebody came at me, especially another Black woman, and I didn't like come back quick enough. And I'm just like, oh man, she got me. Oh man, I need to like, oh, how am I going to do this? So yeah, I've been in that place where I'm like, dang, I need to clap back. I need to come back quicker.
But there's something there to that, right? Lauren talked about, you know, that there are, well, I'll say this, to me, it illustrates that there are a few avenues where we can amass power in so many settings, that the quickest way to do that is to cut each other down, because that is a commodity that we have access to. You know, the other ways that Susan and Biff and Chad and whoever can prove themselves, right, are often cut off for us. You know, our hard work is not seen as hard work. Our, you know, our drive is not seen as drive. Everything we do is misinterpreted. And so this is one of the few ways that's clear, concrete, and other people can read it, right? Like, oh, okay, this girl, she's really down. She took whoever down. So I know she's serious, or she's, you know, she's one we should be, you know, focused on, or and that sort of thing. Alexandra says, yes, Lauren, same at my job. She's 22 now. Sad face. Sorry, Alexandria. Oh, I'm sorry you're going through that.
Sad. That makes you so sad. I'm like, let's go find her. Let me go to her work.
Yes, let's go give her a big hug. One of the other things we wanted to talk a little bit about is how, like, the ways in which power and precarity make it harder for sisterhood to thrive. So a great example is what we're talking about right now in workplace settings, but even in personal settings, you know, the unacknowledged power dynamics and even the misuse, mishandling, the lack of care given to the realities of everybody within your circle can be really hard for folks. And, you know, you alluded to it earlier, Roni, when you were talking about like, oh, maybe not really like her because I can't go to the mall, she's going to the mall, and I can't do all of those things, right? And I said that it's this weird thing of you being asked simultaneously to wear a mask, but also be my sister. And for most of us, that's kind of an impossible position to be put in. It's kind of impossible to be asked simultaneously to pretend, right, something for the sake of our relationship, but still have it be a relationship. And so it's such a warped thing, and I see it play. I've had it play out for myself so often that I'm like, when I look back, I'm like, oh man, like I never acknowledged the power dynamic, and then I was resentful of having to pretend that it wasn't there anymore, and then I resented her because of it. And so, where do we do with that? How do we, you know, challenge that? I think fear comes into play, because I feel like a lot of times it's like we're scared to do it. What do you think? Where does the fear come from? What are we afraid of?
It has to be the vulnerability. Like it is. I'm afraid to tell you that I'm not doing good. I'm not. I'm not doing good. I'm not doing good mentally. I'm not doing good financially. My marriage is in the crapper. You know, my kids don't listen to me, and you know, my favorite jeans don't fit no more. Like we're afraid to like be that, because I mean, this isn't on our syllabus for tonight, but that strong Black woman thing is a cross, right? And so we don't just want to be strong Black women for, you know, the world. We also want to be strong Black women for each other, right? And so then we don't tell each other, I got it bad right now. I'm busted. When I tell you I'm broke as a joke, like I don't know what to tell. We're so afraid to do that. And I would say that I probably have 3 solid, maybe 4 sisterhood circles, right? The Bayhive, me, Sherry, and Janice, my sisters, Danielle and Bernadette, and then my sister Danielle, and then my cousins, the twins, and Raven, right? And so these are all sort of circles I'm in that I'm really vulnerable with these people. And for most of us, especially the family side and my college friends, you know, faith has helped us with vulnerability, I think, or it helps us with vulnerability. Because I can say that I need you to pray for me because blah, blah, blah. And that feels less scary than just being like, listen, ain't none of my shit together right now. So that helps a little bit. But I think the fear is definitely wrapped up in wanting to appear strong. And the truth of the matter is your sisterhood is never going to thrive if you can't be vulnerable with your sisters. And I mean, on the floor where they got to come over and be like, we bought margaritas and chips, and who asked we need to kick? Like, if you can't just be on the floor and mess with them, I don't know how you can make it. And so that that fear has to be, and I guess maybe if you can't overcome the fear, are those not your people? I don't know.
There's a lot wrapped up in that, right? Because it's a leap of faith, and the fear is that they'll let you fall, right? That's the fear, right? That they won't catch you, and then what happens? We got a couple of hands up. I think Christina, Leva, you were first. I'm going to hopefully tell me if I mispronounced your name. Hey, Christina.
Hey. Okay, so Roni, I just want to choke you right now because you just hit on way too much for me. Oh, girl. You were in Houston too. I'll come down there, choke you, see my daughter, hug my grandbaby, and leave. So, how do I put this? So, I isolate myself a lot. Okay, been hurt by a lot of Black women in my life, and I think I've even made comments in the thing like I just don't have relationships, Black relationships. I just don't. I have made myself the nurturer in a lot of my relationships. So I will take people's problems and I will notice that you are hurt and I will come to you and I will hug you and I will hold you. I'll kiss you on the forehead if that's what you need. Grab your ass if it makes you feel better. All right. But I won't reveal myself. Now, we left Texas in 2011 and came back to Virginia. My best friend lived 45 minutes away. I've known this chick since 1992. She lived in Virginia Beach. I've seen her 3 times. She's my best friend. I know if I call her, she's there. But I have just built so many walls that when I saw her, I just saw her in January, and that had been the first time in a year and a half, and I just started spilling all that happened. And she looked at me and she said, "And why haven't you called me?" I didn't even have an answer. I was like, "Girl, I don't even know. I'm just living, you know." It's hard because I have over the years just isolated myself. I won't let people, particularly Black women, into my inner self because of the dirty that has been done to me. You know, I have my associates. I have the 3 girls at work. We laugh, we giggle, we cackle, we roast people, flame broil them, throw them out in the trash, whatever. But I just can't allow that vulnerability part of me to be shown because of the trust issues I have had, in particular with Black women, but here recently white women too. And so I'm just like, how the hell did I even end up with some female friendships, period? Because it seems that I'll take everything that you have, but when I give you what I got, you want to stomp on it.
Yeah, well, first, let me just say thanks for sharing, but also, like, you know, your feelings that you're expressing, like, that's not imagined fear, right? That's real fear that is you protecting yourself from hurt that you felt already. And so I just want to acknowledge that and not be, I hate when that gets dismissive, because sometimes people are like, oh, you need to get over it. I'm like, girl, I'm not getting over nothing. I'm hurt, and let me be hurt, and I deserve to feel hurt. Like, don't do that. So that's the first thing I would say. But also, you know, Roni and I, even the reason why I even came to Roni to do this course is because we were dealing with a lot of betrayal in our lives, and I was like, I didn't want to put because I felt myself going to that place. I felt myself being like, nope, I'm closing up shop. Walls are coming down. I'm not going to be talking. If I don't know you now, like, that's it. I'm not, no new friends, no new nobody. I'm just closing ranks. That's it. It's done. That's
Follow,
it.
not friend. Follow, not friend. Right, Roni?
Yes, exactly. And I started feeling, and that's not me, like, at all. Like, I'm the one that, like, whoever you are, like, my DMs would be filled with people just like, oh, this is going on. Can you connect me with something? That's how I function in the world. When I felt myself being like, I felt the walls closing in, and while it felt nice, like the thought of it being closed, just because like the safety of that, I also was really torn. Like, what does that mean for me? What does it mean for my work? What does it mean for the person that I want to be in the world? And so my idea of doing this course was kind of my excuse to lean out from that feeling and kind of pull the reins a little bit and be like, nah, I'm gonna try and channel this and try and actually have some conversations with people about sisterhood to see if there's a way forward for me to not have that happen. But I'll say that I am definitely, like, I'm different now. You know, the betrayal changed me. And so that's just something that I'm learning to kind of navigate and figure out what this new normal looks like for me and what it feels like a little bit, which sucks, but
yeah,
you know.
It does.
It does.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Christina.
Mm-hmm.
And we have one more. Biden, did you want to add something to Christina's? Okay. And then Jasmine, also Jasmine Miller, you had your hand up. I'm gonna unmute you. Hey, Jasmine.
Hey.
Hey.
So yeah, I was thinking about that power dynamic and how that plays out when you are trying to be vulnerable, and having had an experience of having a friendship where you know, I'm always seen as kind of like the rock person, the person that, you know, that's dependable or reliable, but then having a friend who is always in need. And so then when it's my turn to be vulnerable, it's like, well, no, like, my hurt is more than your hurt. And then like that not having the space to be the strong friend, but then also the vulnerable friend at times. And unfortunately, in that, you know, that power dynamic, it's kind of used against you to, you know, have someone always kind of play, I don't want to say the victim, but just, you know, that their hurt is always more important, and always putting you in a position where you have to be the strong one and you're not allowed to be vulnerable. And that's an experience I've had that's been pretty hard and has unfortunately also affected other the way I've had relationships and friendships with other women.
Ooh. So Jasmine, you didn't know this, but this segue you just like served up to us, I don't even know, like, I couldn't even script this.
So were you in our meeting today? Like, I
don't know if you were with us or what, but this is really, oh wow. Anyway, yes, thank you so much. Because we are really, this is the next topic we really want to get into, and it's some of the, you know, at the heart of this idea of power and precarity. So I'll let Roni go ahead. Thank you so much, Jasmine.
Listen, that was so perfect. Like, that was just the perfect setup. I'm sitting here because, you know, Jasmine, you were talking. I'm like, yeah, you on my notes. You in my notes. But this sort of last piece that we were talking about is who is supported in sisterhood and how. Who gets supported, right? I think it's great that Christina and Jasmine both share stories of having to be the strong one, and then but nobody else is really listening to the strong one. But what are the commonalities of that, right? Who's allowed to to have a full range of emotions, okay? Who's allowed to cuss and scream and yell, and who's told you need to get over it? Who's allowed to cry it all out, and who's told you just need to be strong. You're stronger than that. Now, let me say this. I am a strong person, physically strong. Like, I can lift some shit, okay? I think that I probably have a physically imposing stature, as in, like my mom always says, I walk into a room like I'm gonna whoop somebody's ass. I don't mean to do it. It's just who I've always been, right? And nobody would call me shy, okay? Nobody would say that about me. So because of that, I'm not always allowed to be vulnerable or to experience the full range of emotions. It's like, beef up, you good, you straight, right? But I'm also seeing this, or I see this online, especially, with Facebook and Instagram, and you see people's pictures and who they are. And I watch how, fat women are silenced, dark-skinned women are silenced, trans women are silenced. So, and we know these things to be true. And at the end of the day, people are just like, well, it ain't really that. It's just, I don't really want to say, she just needs to, and it's always some excuse as to why that particular Black woman, that I always say, that brand of Black woman, we don't want to hear from her. She's not allowed. No. And I say this all the time with when the textbook story went viral, I'll tell people this and I'll say it till the day I die. I know that story was palatable for the media and CNN and everybody because I was a woman married to a man and we had kids and we lived in the burbs and I was getting my PhD. I was palatable. The story worked. But had I been living in a housing project in Houston, would anybody have listened to me, right? Would it have been a big concern, And so we really were thinking about that, like who's allowed to be the rock and who's allowed to be, the piece of glass, and why? Like, why does it happen that way, right? Which we know, it's obviously connected to some of all the things we were talking about earlier in the class and who has to wear a mask and not acknowledging these things. But who have you noticed, Leslie, sort of who gets supported and who doesn't get supported? And
well, look here, being on Team Light Skin myself, I have to say that I have noticed.
Yes.
I've been light skin my whole life. I've been light skin. And I will say that for sure, especially amongst Black women and how the world receives Black women, that color is, in my opinion, one of the first things that I notice in terms of who is supported, who isn't supported, who's allowed to be a certain way and who isn't allowed to be a certain way. And that often, here's the thing, it's this thing of, we talk about all the time about Black men not understanding misogyny because they're also oppressed. And I feel like that comes into play with colorism as well. Because light-skinned Black women, certainly we're still Black women and we still have to deal with the realities of moving in the world as a Black woman, but that does not mean that the privileges inherent to our skin color don't affect our darker hued sisters differently. And so there's this notion of like not acknowledging those things and also not adjusting how you move in the world to that, right? So what does your support sound like? What are you lifting up and how? Like there's a lot of things that come into play with all of that. So that's one thing that I noticed. The other thing that I noticed is obviously like education, language, class comes into play. So if you speak the right way, if you say the big words, if you write really well, like your opinion all of a sudden becomes more important. One of the like biggest lessons I learned when I first started organizing years and years ago was, somebody would say to me like, oh, well, people in these neighborhoods, they don't know about policy. And I was like, slow your roll. What you mean is they don't know how to talk in policy jargon. That does not mean they don't understand policy because they know what they need. They know about their experience. They know what's necessary for themselves and for their neighborhood and their communities to thrive. But because they don't say it the way you want them to say it, you've basically negated their entire experience. And so I find that happens quite often. We saw that, during the George Zimmerman trial with Rachel Gentile, just because she was, although bilingual, she wasn't the well-spoken, prim and proper Black girl. Her entire testimony was taken like with 17 grains of salt just off of that. Plus she was dark skinned, plus she was heavy set, all of these things that kind of stacked against her and made her a lived experience. It negated it.
Yeah.
It it literally negated it. And so those are the places I see it show up so often. Christina has her hand up, so I'm gonna mute her and then we'll come back to you, Roni. Hey, Christina.
Hey, so team light skin over here. And yes, you speak so much truth to that. And so 2 years ago, I took a new position at a new school. And I'm more than sure that I was hired to establish a precedence because there were new Black teachers in the building. And for the first year, the principal almost didn't talk to me. I mean, he interviewed me, he hired me. But there was an intimidation factor on his part that was very hard for me to comprehend. I mean, I'm far from the angry Black woman, okay? And I didn't understand it. And our AP, who was newly hired as a Black man, he was telling me he is intimidated by you. And I was like, I don't get it, but why? It took a very long time for him to understand that I do have a sharp tongue, but it comes out when it's needed, that I do speak my mind, but I'm not overtly blunt, and that I do have well thought out opinions and well preserved ideas, and I do have a lot to contribute. So the relationship literally tilted this year to the point that he now sees me as somebody not to be intimidated by, but almost an equal. But it took a whole year of him dancing around me, trying to figure out where he fit with me before it even happened. And so this past week, we were doing our standardized testing, and there was an irregularity in my classroom. And he got angry and upset about it. And, I'll own up to my faults. Okay, whatever. I should have said something. I take that. And I was so utterly surprised. We have a new counselor, dark-skinned woman, not very friendly with her, haven't had an opportunity to meet her, don't know anything about her. So I don't really have a judgment on her. She's just the new counselor, But I can go off my past experiences being light-skinned and dealing with Black women. So, I'm weary. I have my wall. She jumped right in and said, no, this is not your fault. We are a collaborative group. She said, and you had this child until 12 o'clock. What happened from 12 o'clock to 3:30? Why didn't this happen? And I was shocked and awed. And she pulled me aside later and she said, look, I did that because we not going down like that. And I was like, what? Whoa, what just happened here? She said, we're not doing that. She said, all we got is each other. And I'm not going to allow him to let you take this fall. So in the course of a year, I've had two very different experiences dealing with the hierarchy of working for white people. And then this counselor stepping up and pretty much almost obliviating my perception of a lot of things. It just, it really just kind of touched me on a level that I hadn't experienced before. And I just wanted to acknowledge that because there is so much interracism within us that keeps us from bonding. And I know that, I'm aware of that. And I acknowledge the privilege of my skin. But it made me go out my way to say hello to her the next day. I was like, let me come over here. I was like, hey, how you doing? And I'm so happy to see you. And went and saw her at lunch too. Hey girl, you eating lunch in the cafe? She was like, yeah. She's like, I got my chicken. She said, you want some? So no, I'm low carb. We all good. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Christina. That's a great experience. Thank you so much for sharing. That's great.
I think, one other thing I was going to say was I was talking to a group of women, and I was talking and I said something and I was like, because I think that we talk about, heavier set Black women, I kept saying heavy set, right? And one of my friends said, you can say fat, like I'm good. And I was like, I'm not supposed to say it. She was like, listen, let me tell you something. That don't people. She was like, when you keep dancing around it, and she said, and I'm your friend, don't do me like that. And I was just like, okay. She was like, because you keep saying that, like, I'm not a woman that weighs 280 pounds, and I am. and I'm good, and bitch, I'm fine. So it was like this moment for me where it was like, you know what? I don't know. She was just like, that's your issue. That's your issue, not mine.
That's you, girl. That's you.
She was like, that's you. That ain't me. I'm good. I'm Gucci, And so we talked a lot, and we spent a lot of time talking about just sort of this idea of what it looks like to be in a different body and what it feels like and how people expect you. I used to see this a lot as a teacher and a coach. I had track girls, and some of my track girls were they were as thin as a rail, and some of them were as 20 big as 20 rails, right? They're through shot put and discus. And I would get so upset because the boys, my bigger girls, they would always be like, oh, she tough. And they would jump on her or jump on their backs and stuff. And I would be like, hey, don't let him do that to you. And the girls would be like, it's okay. And I thought that's where that sort of dynamic starts, right? That like, they're not going to do that to the little petite girl over there. Like, she's allowed to be dainty and all of that. But the girl who's, 6'2" and can throw the shot put, they want to wrestle her down. I'm like, hey, you're not gonna do that to her. Not on my watch, And so it was like the way that boys were literally treating girls who were in different bodies, and how I was just thinking about how that plays out and how that's probably played out even in their adult lives. That like, well, she can handle it, but we'll treat her like a little, she's a little lamb, and we'll treat her like, whatever we want to treat her like, and allow this person to be the full range of emotions. But this one, I think, like you said, Lauren, you're so resilient. You got it. You're gonna bounce back.
Right. But Ronnie, you're okay.
Ronnie, you have a husband. You're just okay.
You're okay.
You're fine.
Not that no one said, are you okay? Or that you declared yourself okay, but you have been deemed okay.
A lot of people love you, Leslie. You're fine. That other person may not have as many people who love them. Child. I can't.
I'm unmuted, Asia. Asia, what you got to add to the combo, my dear? Asia, you there? We can hear you. You're unmuted. Uh-oh.
No, Asia.
Wait, there was something, and then it went away. All right, well, I'm going to leave you unmuted, Asia. If you connect through, just say so. I did want to read Lauren's comment in case people didn't see in the chat. She says, Laud, I'm going through long-term employment when my friends are getting VP jobs handed to them. They're showing their sympathy to me, and I'm like, LOL, oh girl. There's no way you know how I'm feeling. And then no one checks on me because I'm, as Ronnie said, so resilient. Yeah. That's like that curse of, Ronnie touched on it earlier, that strong Black woman curse. Or, again, and Laura mentioned this, like if you start to be seen as a nurturer, if you start to be seen as somebody who solves problems, if you start to be seen as somebody who can like juggle all the things, all of a sudden, when you find yourself in that position of being hurt, being upset, going through a hard time, having depression, all of those things that are human, right? Yeah. You're not allowed to have those things, or your experiences with those things are discounted because you got it, you good, you're all right. So that's where, again, I feel like that's a part of that power and also that fear of being vulnerable, right? Because if that wall becomes, or if that mask becomes what everybody sees, right, that you can't let it slip either, and it's just this horrible trap that you end up in.
Well, and when I take, and I haven't had one in a while, although one is coming on, like if I take a Facebook break where I'm just like, hey, deactivate my page, when I see people in real life, people who have my phone number, you know, they're like, why are you off? Like, when are you coming back? Like, I can't, and I'm just like, I need a break. Like, it's like, but Roni, you the one who like, go get everybody and you'll stand up for everybody. And I'm like, yeah, but I need to sit down for myself. How about that? You know, but like this idea that like, you got to be on all the time. What you mean you deactivated? What you doing? Where you going? Why you not on here? Well, I needed you today. And I'm like, hey, I needed to be by myself. How about that?
My whole self. And
I think too, like being an extrovert, people like, but you love people all the time. And I really do. I'm an extrovert to my core. But sometimes I'm like, hey, go away. Talk to the hand.
Absolutely. Asia, you're still unmuted, so if you ever get your mic connected, feel free to chime in. Well, just like that, we are at the end of class once again this week.
Just like that.
Thank y'all all for joining us. It's been so great. Next week is our final week together, and we are going to be discussing the structure of sisterhood, and a colon after that is group chat saved my life. And so we're going to have a discussion. This is going to really be about kind of what we can utilize and take from this course into the real world from here. What are the tools, opportunities, resources that we can employ to strengthen bonds with each other, and also to create spaces for deeper bonds to exist amongst us? Because I don't think that there's a lot focused on that. I think, you know, that article about how like, oh, self-care is more than a bubble bath. I actually hate that article because sometimes self-care is a bubble bath, or whatever. But I do feel like there's this thing about like sisterhood is more than yes, queen, and, you know, just like, you know, oh, I love your makeup or whatever. And those things are part of sisterhood. They are. But we also need to talk about like developing concrete tools, both in the digital world and in the real world, and some bridging therein, I think, in this day and age, in the year of our Lord Beyonce 2018. What can we do to kind of make that happen?
That'll be a fun conversation. I think it really will be, because I guess we talked a little bit about this last week about, you know, long-term structure and tools and things like that, which I think is super important, because I think that anybody who's probably been in the class, whether it's just today or these past 3 weeks, is interested in sisterhood. And so that's exciting, is that, you know, I think there's a good group of us who are out there like into fostering good and healthy sisterhood. And so I think next week will be super fun to talk about like how you do it, you know? And nobody ever talks about how you do it, right? Like nobody ever says, how you do that?
We're supposed to just know, or we're just supposed to know. It's just supposed to happen. It's very organic.
Yeah, no, and it's very intentional is what it is.
Like everything else in life, you got to plan and be intentional about sisterhood also. Yes.
Exactly. So it'll be good. It'll be good.
Absolutely. So tomorrow, everyone will get obviously links to our final syllabus for the course. You'll be using the same login for next Wednesday for our final class together. And feel free to jump into the group as well. Add your thoughts about any of the topics we've had thus far, anything that you want to maybe see us talk about for sure next week. And we're also going to hopefully set up post-group projects for us at the end of class next week. So I'm really excited for that too. Did you have anything else for the people, Roni?
I do not. Thank y'all so much, and can't wait to see y'all again.
Yes, we will see y'all next week. Let's see. Christina said, two people had mentioned. Christy had mentioned that she says, "My goodness, if I hear one more time that I'm okay because I have a husband, I despise this assumption." And Christina said, "Or you'll be okay because you have great kids, a great education, blah blah blah." Yeah, S. Singleton says, "Thank you so much. I needed this. So glad this came across my Facebook feed. Thanks for joining us." Asia says she doesn't know what happened to her mic, but here's what she had to say. Basically, I spent my 20s helping my high school best friend raise her kids as a single parent. When my kids came, she was literally MIA and lived a mile away from me. I saw her 3 times in the 10 months I was pregnant. I feel like she's been accustomed to being the victim, helpless, and cared for by me and others, and didn't know what didn't know what to do when I needed her. Yeah, we touched on that a little bit about this notion of like, you turn around sometimes and you realize that because of your nurture role, or whatever role you might play, I have this in my family. I'm the planner. So when we doing stuff, I plan all the things. And then like, we'll get to do stuff. And I'm like, y'all just assume I was really going to just do everything. Just don't worry about, I started a new business. I moved to a new state. You don't care about none of that, huh? Just, she gonna do it.
You got it.
She got it, right? She got it. So it's like, there are those things for sure. Thank you so much for sharing that too, Asia. And I love you. All right, so we will see everybody next week, same time, same station. I will try my best not to have technical difficulties again and be on time. And we'll have the recording of this up as well. I'll post it in the group as we have the previous weeks. And we'll see y'all next time. Bye.